Hello and good evening, Chicago. Welcome on in to another episode of Chi-Town Weekly here on IE Sports Radio. That was a weird game yesterday for the Bears. On the one hand, we had Justin Fields yet again setting records, taking names, looking the part of a franchise quarterback. And as we've discussed before, that's the most important thing to come out of this season. But on the other hand, you had a 14-point lead at home against the Lions, and you lost. So where do we come away from this game? Well, we'll be breaking that down on tonight's episode and trying to make sense of what was a very confusing game by the time the final gun sounded on the lakefront yesterday. And then we've got a new manager in town on the south side. Yeah, I know it's a little bit of stale news, but we didn't talk at all about Pedro Grifol last week, so we are overdue. We need to discuss the new skipper in town, plus the hot stove season. Now that the World Series is finally done, we've got a hot stove right around the corner in MLB. We'll be discussing that and more right here on Chi-Town Weekly. Buckle it on, everybody. Let's have some fun. And hello and good evening, everyone. I am your host, Adam Karnick. Thank you for being here tonight for episode 111 of Chi-Town Weekly. Lots to go through tonight. Of course, we're going to be talking a lot about the Bears and the game yesterday on the lakefront, what we think both in the short term and in the long term for this one. And we're also going to be discussing baseball on both sides of town. We've got a new manager over on the south side. Pedro Grifol takes over for Tony La Russa. Thank goodness. We're going to be discussing that. And we are officially, finally today, closing the chapter on a Cubs legend from the last couple of years. That and some hot stove prep as we get going. But of course, we can't go anywhere without taking care of our homework first. So we'll take care of that right here and now. IE Sports Radio. Of course, we are available for you on all the social media platforms at IE Sports Radio, whether that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, we are here for you. Just search IE Sports Radio. For the last 8 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans. With your help, we are ready to take the next step. When you go to our website, iesportsradio.com, you'll see our Patreon link with 5 different tiers. The first one starts at just $5 a month. This donation gets you a shout-out on every one of our shows. Higher tiers also include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to our podcasting university, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment. Thank you all very much for continuing to make IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports. And do you want to shout out our Patreon supporters at this point? Bay Area Raised, Emlos Great, Key to the Gate, and Anonymous. Thank you very much for continuing to support us on Patreon. It is very, very appreciated. So the last couple of weeks, I've been saying that the Bears have had fun losses. The loss in Dallas. Yeah, you got blown out, but we saw Justin continue to emerge. Then the loss last week against the Dolphins, 35-32. Yeah, that it still goes down as a loss, but those were against playoff teams. Those were against high quality opponents that you knew were ultimately better than the Bears. But we got to see Justin Fields continue to grow. We got to see Luke Getsy grow as a play caller. We got to see Matt Eberflus continue to show that he's got a hold on this team. And then yesterday, that's a bad loss. There's nothing fun about losing at home to the Lions. Yes, I know that it improves their draft stock. Yes, I know that ultimately wins this season don't matter because the team's not going anywhere this season. But there is something to be said for beating the teams that you're supposed to beat, for beating the opponents that you're supposed to beat. The Bears are better than the Lions. I know the scoreboard didn't reflect that yesterday on the lakefront. The Bears are better than the Lions. They're even rosters across the board, but two notable exceptions where the Bears are better. They're better at quarterback, and they're better at head coach. And in a game like that yesterday, that should have been enough. And it ultimately wasn't. And that's frustrating to me. I know that they can improve and get better, and they will, but yesterday's still a tough loss. Justin made strides. Big ones. And as soon as those words left my mouth, I realized that, he ran for 147 yards. He made big strides. He continued to show you that he's in command of this offense, that he and Getsy are on a good page together. And yes, he made a horrible mistake yesterday on the ill-advised screen pass that got intercepted and returned to the house by Jeff Okudah. But he then immediately made up for it on the very next drive, bettering his own club record from last week where he ran for a 61-yard score. He bested that by going 67 yards for a touchdown yesterday. He did well enough to win. I'm shocked that the team around him couldn't step up in a significant way to preserve that win. Giving up 3 touchdowns in the final 10 minutes of that game. Obviously, that's not 100% on the defense because there was the pick 6 in there. But somebody's got to step up on that defense and do something. Come on. Somebody make a play. Jack Sanborn had a great game yesterday. 2 sacks. He had an interception that should have counted. Frankly, that was pick any 4-letter word in the book, and you would have an accurate description of the penalty that got called on Jalen Johnson that wiped out the Sanborn interception. I realize that officiating is incredibly hard in the NFL, And those are the best in the world doing it. We saw evidence 10 years ago of just how steep the drop-off is between NFL refs and the next guy. But you'd think that a requirement for illegal hands to the face would be somebody's hands getting in somebody's face. It would seem to me that that would be a requirement for getting that penalty. I think it's ridiculous that that's also not reviewable. I know that penalties are one of those that as soon as somebody in an owner's meeting brings it up, then, well, if you want that reviewable, then we should make this reviewable. And around and around and around and around they go, the dog chasing its tail. But there's a few of these that it just should be common sense that if it's not a judgment-based penalty, that it should be reviewable. And hands to the face, you should be able to review, oh, did his hands actually get in somebody's face? Oh, they didn't? Never mind. We're going to pick up that flag. Because that was a huge swing in that game. Sanborn made an amazing... it looked for a minute like he was wearing 54, not 57, when he made that interception. That was just an amazing play by Sanborn. And it was a shame that I got wiped out by a terrible penalty call. But somebody's got to step up on defense. All the Bears playmakers defensively right now are in the secondary. They don't have anybody in their front seven who's anything above replacement level. I know Justin Jones had a good game yesterday. I still need to see more from the three technique, more consistency from the three technique. There's too many times where for every time Justin Jones was getting penetration, there was another 2 or 3 times where he was just getting moved out of the way and not being effective at all. I saw a stat, and this is going to be 2 parts here. I saw a stat this afternoon, and I want to see if I can find it again real quickly here, where it was just talking about just how inept the defensive line has been at getting pressure. Here we go. Now this is courtesy of Jonathan Wood on Twitter. In the last 4 games, Chicago's defensive line, a total of 918 snaps, 0 sacks, and 7 quarterback hits. And remember that Robert Quinn was still on the defensive line for one of those 4 games. So I wanted to look. When was the last time a Bears defensive lineman got a sack? You know, you look at it right now. I mean, the team leader in sacks right now is Jaquan Brisker with 3. Roquan Smith, who's not on the team anymore, with 2.5. Jack Sanborn got 2 sacks yesterday. That puts him in a 3-way tie for 3rd. You've got Tevin Gibson and Justin Jones, both also have 2 sacks. Now they have Gibson here. They have Travis Gibson listed as a linebacker. I would disagree with that assessment. He plays far more defensive line than he does linebacker, but okay, we'll roll with it. So I was kind of wondering, who is the last defensive lineman for the Bears to register a sack even? And it's Al-Qadim Muhammad against Washington in that Thursday night game got a sack. That was 5 games ago. You know, the Bears' defensive line just, it's not generating pressure. And I give Alan Williams, the defensive coordinator, credit. He blitzed more in the second half against the Lions. It didn't get home. They've got to do something to somehow generate some consistent pass rush, some pressure somehow to help this defense out. And this is just, it's unsustainable. And I know they're replacement level players across the board in the front seven. And I know that wins right now aren't the most important thing. You don't want to sacrifice the development of the team to get a win. But Justin Fields is carrying this team. They just set an NFL record. They became the first team in NFL history to score at least 29 points in 3 consecutive games. Think about that for a minute. That we have a Bears offense. They haven't had a special teams score. They haven't had a defensive score these last 3 games. They've scored 29 or more points each of the last 3 games, and they've lost all 3. They're the first team in NFL history to do that. You know, and you look at the time of possession numbers as well. You know, we were thinking, boy, if how many times have we said, boy, if the Bears could just score points on offense and hold on to the ball, we'd be unstoppable. You know, we'd never lose. Now, they did lose the time of possession battle yesterday by a minute and a half, a minute and 36 seconds to be precise. But against the Dolphins, they held the ball for almost 35 minutes. And against the Cowboys, they held the ball for over 36 minutes. Over 12 minutes more than the Cowboys did. They lost all 3 of those games. It's amazing how they're just not winning. And it's frustrating. Because that's a game they should have won. That's just flat out, that is a game they should have won. And instead, they fall to 3-7. I was thinking yesterday, going into that, hey, they're going to beat the Lions. They're going to get first divisional win of the season, going to snap a losing streak, and they're going to be all alone in second place in this division because obviously they'll have beaten the Lions. And then the Packers are playing the Cowboys. They shouldn't beat the Cowboys. And now instead, it's the exact opposite. The Packers won. They now are in sole possession of second place in the division. And the Bears fall all the way to 4th. They're tied with the Lions now. They've got one more loss than the Lions, I believe, one more loss than the Lions, because the Lions, if I remember right, they've had their bye week already. So I pull up the standings here real quick. And it's not going to load. But if I'm remembering correctly, the Lions have had their bye. Yeah, they have. The Lions have had their bye. So the Bears, now they've lost a tiebreaker with the Lions. They're in last place in the division. I was not expecting to be here in this spot today. I was very prepared to be celebrating a victory. Celebrating obviously the continued emergence of Justin Fields. And hey, now we also get the bonus of having a a win to celebrate along with it. Instead, we're still waiting. We're still waiting for that win. This team still hasn't figured out how to win games. How to win games late. And I know it'll come, and I know there's silver linings in all this. They're right now, I believe they would be drafting third right now if the draft were, if we were in the off season and the season were over. I think I believe they'd be drafting third right now. You've got the Texans would be first and the Raiders would be second, and then you'd have the Bears. Thanks to the fact that the Bears only have one conference win all season long, they'd be ahead of the other 3-7 teams in the league, the Panthers and the Saints. So that's where we are. It's a weird. Now, okay, so I've done a lot of negative here. There were positives. Justin Fields, get this. The Bears tweeted this out earlier today. Justin Fields becomes the first player, or he becomes just the second player in team history to run for at least 147 yards in back-to-back games. You know who the first guy was? Walter Payton. Walter Payton. The fact that you can put Justin Fields into the same category or sentence or trivia bit as Walter Payton, that's cool. That's really cool. And he accounted for 314 yards yesterday. All 4 touchdowns were somehow attributed to Justin Fields. He had 2 fantastic throws to Cole Kmet. And, of course, those 2 touchdown runs, each showcasing a different ability of his. You know, of course, we talked about the 67-yarder where he just turned on the Jets and went. But how about that one he had for the first score where he turned a busted play, broke out of an arm tackle, and just lowered his shoulder and would not be denied the end zone? That was outstanding on the part of Fields. So there was good that came out of that yesterday. But a lot of question marks, too. Where was Chase Claypool? You know, Chase Claypool was only on the field for 19 snaps, and he only had 2 targets. I did hear Eberflus addressed that with the media this afternoon, and he said that he and Getsy talked about that, and that Claypool was the primary target on a lot of the plays where he was out there, but simply the Lions, the way they had their coverage drawn up, it was designed to take away Chase Claypool. But still, for a guy who at least technically is a starter on your team, now he's really a starter just because he's out there for the first play of the game. But for one of your starting wide receivers to only get 2 targets, that was very surprising to me. I was expecting to see more from Chase Claypool yesterday. Hopefully we will, because they spent quite a bit to get him in a trade, and it was understandable last week why he wouldn't have gotten used a ton, but they had time to work him into the game plan this week, and they didn't. So that was surprising. That was odd. But all in all, it was a strange day in the NFL yesterday. You had the Bears losing to the Lions. You had all that weirdness going on in Buffalo with the Vikings and with the Vikings and the Bills. That was bizarre. And then you had something that kind of hit close to home a little bit. You had an owner's self-appointed coach guiding a team yesterday with the Colts. Now, it worked out yesterday for the Colts. It did not work out with the White Sox. but the White Sox seem to be on the mend. We're going to talk about them a little bit on the other side of this break. You are listening to Chi-Town Weekly here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, everybody? This is Darren Rodriguez. Are you a fan of volleyball? Are you a fan of Thunder Spikes? Then I have the show for you, Set Point, where I cover NCAA men's and women's volleyball, high school boys and girls volleyball, beach volleyball, and even professional volleyball. Catch the action every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Attention, all sports fans! If you're someone who wakes up each morning with lists of sporting events to go along with your to-do list for the day, then you just might be a diehard. The world of sports is as vast as the ocean is deep, including the major leagues, the minor leagues, the colleges, and everything in between. This is me, your boy Larry B of IE Sports Radio, welcoming you to join me every Monday evening at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on The Defining Moment, a show that focuses on what really matters in the sports world, sports themselves, and nothing outside of them. Once again, tune in for The Defining Moment with me, your boy Larry B, every Monday evening at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on IE Sports Radio, right here on Spreaker.com. We'll see you there.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IU Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey, what's up, sports fans? You're looking for a different type of sports talk show, something you haven't heard before? You got to check out the BS3 Sports Show every other Saturday on 2 Live Stews Radio, 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Sports talk at its finest. Always have great guests, playing some good hip-hop. You don't want to miss it. Make sure to tune in to the BS3 Sports Show every other Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern.
What's happening, sports fans? Are you a fan of Southern California sports? Are you looking for a show hotter than a hot summer day in California? Then look no further than the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, where I talk about all things Southern California sports. That's right, all sports teams from Southern California. From the hard-hitting tackles of the NFL, to the killer crossovers and big three-pointers of the NBA and WNBA, to the grand slams of the MLB, to the bone-chilling goals of the NHL, and to the booming kicks of the MLS, the SoCal Supreme Sports Show has it all for you. Oh, and let us not forget about the college sports as well. So join me, Taryn Rodriguez, every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back into Chi-Town Weekly, everyone, here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Want to say thank you to Taryn Rodriguez for hanging out with us in the chat room tonight. If you are listening live, feel free, hop on into that chat room. Just log on in to Spreaker.com, hop on into the chat room. Or if you are listening otherwise, as a podcast later on after the fact, just thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it. Adam Kernick here for a little bit more before actually Taryn takes over with Set Point, getting us caught up with everything happening in the world of volleyball. So we talked a lot about the Bears there in that first segment. I wanted to switch away from football a little bit and talk about some baseball. We had a big signing about a week and a half ago. I apologize that I didn't talk about it at all last week. I was just too caught up in my Justin Fields excitement. But the White Sox have replaced Tony La Russa. It took a bit. Doesn't change the fact that they never should have hired him in the first place, but that's all water under the bridge at this point. Pedro Grifol comes over from the Kansas City Royals to take over for the White Sox. And at first I was not overwhelmed by the hire at first. But then listening to him, I got a little more intrigued by it and interested in it. And I like where they went. First of all, it's fantastic that Jerry Reinsdorf allowed Rick Hahn to make the hire. Now, we can have the conversation of whether or not Rick Hahn should still be the general manager of the White Sox after this last season and a lot of his guys that he signed up to long-term deals that they're now stuck with, for lack of a better term, should still be there to be hiring the coach, be hiring the manager. But at least Jerry, at least now we all know that this is Rick's guy, because we all knew that with Tony La Russa, that was not Rick's guy, that it was Jerry's guy. So now at least we know that this is Rick's guy, and this is somebody that Rick wanted here, and Rick is on board with. Grifol comes over from the Kansas City Royals, and one of the things that intrigued me listening to him talk and listening to him coming from Kansas City, he brings a unique perspective onto the White Sox. because he had to prepare to face them for these past several seasons. He's been with the Royals for years. You know, he's 10, 12 years with the Kansas City organization, long time there. So he's been preparing to face the White Sox, 20 some odd times a year, all that time. So he is able to bring in that perspective of, well, here was our game plan for trying to face these hitters and these batters and these pitchers. So now he can speak to, well, here's what teams are trying to do to beat you. So here's what we would do to counter that, to correct that. He's able to bring that perspective into it, which is great, which is something that they need, because they underperformed horribly last season, going 581 and 81 overall. And they just looked lost too many times out there on the field, lost and disinterested. And they didn't have a plan. So now you have somebody that will definitely be able to give them a plan of attack, a plan of action. Hey, here's what teams are trying to do to beat you. Here's what you can do to counter that. Here's what we need to work on. Ethan Katz is still going to be the pitching coach. The bullpen coach is still going to be there, but the rest of the coaching staff is going to be his guys, Griffol's guys. Another thing that got me on board with Griffol when I heard it, and I was driving when I heard it, and I almost had to stop and pull over because it so choked me up. A little bit of his story of how he came to become a manager. Now get this. So Griffol was a minor league player for a brief time. He was a minor league catcher for a brief time. And then he went to go work in the front office. And he knew that he had the urge to be back out on the field, that he didn't want to be in a front office job. He wanted to be down on the field with the players in some capacity. He knew that he wanted to be a manager, but he also knew that the path to get there, not only was it going to be hard, it was going to put his family in a bind. He has a wife and 2 daughters. And that the path to get to be where he wanted to be was going to involve going back down to the minor leagues as a coach and then working his way up the ladder. And he knew that minor league coaches don't make what I'm making now. That instead of living in a house, we're going to have to move into a condo or an apartment. And it's going to be small, and it's going to be tight. He also knew that switching from being in the front office to being a coach on the field and ultimately a manager on the field was going to mean he was going to be gone for a lot of days, for a long time. His family was going to be without him. And he knew that he couldn't just make that decision unilaterally without talking with them. And so he went to his family and he laid out, what he was thinking and also his concerns. And his daughters looked at him and said, "Dad, how can we chase our dreams and not tell you to do the same thing?" And I heard that, and I about had to pull over because my heart just snapped when I heard that. It was just, oh my gosh. You know, that his daughters and his wife, you know, had that support for him. That, you know, you've given us permission to chase our dreams. We need to give you that same courtesy. Yes, go chase your dreams. We're going to be here to support you. Let's go on this adventure together. So that right there, I want nothing but the best for Grifol and the White Sox now after hearing that. That was just such an amazing story to hear that. So now we've had the World Series. The Houston cheaters, I mean the trash can beaters, I mean the buzzer wearers, I mean the Astros. I'm still not over that. I probably won't be. Maybe if Rob Manfred would, I don't know, punish them, maybe I'd get over it. So Houston won the World Series, beating Philly. I know that was a rough day for Cash and Chris. And they'll probably still continue to be pouring out their souls a little bit tomorrow on Philly sports. That's okay. They've got the undefeated Eagles that are playing now and probably still going to be undefeated by the time they get on tomorrow to help ease their pain a little bit there. Yeah, I like that one from Taryn. The trash tros. Yeah, I like that. Basically, any derogatory statement towards the Astros, I'm okay with. You know, so long as you don't go, you know, too far over the line. Yeah, being happy for Dusty Baker. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I guess it's nice that Dusty wins one. I don't like that it came for that organization, though. Pick any other organization. Heck, I'd even be okay with it coming for the Cardinals or the Guardians or somebody like that. Just not Houston. Not those cheaters. Not that one. But we're officially in hot stove season now. So what do you do now if you're the White Sox? What do you do if you're Rick Hahn? Rick Hahn has already said they don't have money to spend in free agency. There's no money to be spent in free agency. But they've got to fix so many problems with this team. You need some left-handed bats. You need some actual honest-to-goodness outfielders. A.J. Pollock is not going to be back. You need to get Andrew Vaughn out of the outfield and into the infield. It's looking like Jose Abreu's probably not going to be back. So what do you do? How do you fix this if you're the White Sox? How do you improve on this roster? So many of these guys are already locked up into deals. They're going to have to make trades. They're just going to have to bite the bullet and trade some of these pieces and try to make some unorthodox trades. And you don't see a lot of trades in baseball where it's involving major league players on both sides of the deal. I mean, we saw it last year with the Dodgers and the White Sox where they traded Pollock. Pollock came over from the Dodgers in exchange for Craig Kimbrell. So we've seen a couple instances of it, but now I'm going to blank on his name. The second baseman, who is now with the Cubs. That involved major league talent on both sides. But you don't see it happen a lot. But one guy I'd be very interested in I would be very interested to see if they move Aloy. I think Jimenez, the White Sox have a surplus of designated hitters. And that's what Jimenez is. Yes, he can survive out in the outfield, but really, he is a designated hitter. I would be interested to see if they move him. I don't think... I'd say Tim Anderson, because this is such a strong free agent class at shortstop. I mean, you've got some superstars at shortstop. Carlos Correa, Trey Turner. You've got some amazing talent out there at the shortstop position. So if you were to trade Tim Anderson, you could still theoretically go get a major league shortstop in free agency. The problem is Rick Hahn has said they don't have money. So that, to me, takes that out of the equation. So I think Tim Anderson stays. Yoan Moncada, you would be trading at probably about the absolute nadir of his trade value. I mean, just none. You would be getting a penny on the dollar in trade value for Yoan Moncada if you were to trade him right now. So I think he's still there. Luis Robert, I don't want Luis Robert going anywhere. I want him staying put. I think that's still a piece that they could build. That's still a piece that they could build around and have some success with. But Aloy Jimenez is an interesting one to me. I wonder if he wouldn't, what they would get in a trade for Aloy, if they could get, somebody that's a little bit more defensive minded, somebody that can still produce with a bat, but can make their lineup a little more versatile instead of the exact same thing, which is a right-handed power bat that you inexplicably were telling to not swing for power last year. But it's going to be a very interesting offseason, to say the least, for Rick Hahn and the Sox. But at least now they have a manager. They have a guy in charge who looks like he could be building up to something here. He could be turning into something, which would be fantastic and wonderful. And I'm rooting for him. I want to talk about the other side of town now real quick before we get out of here, as we do have Taryn Rodriguez and Set Point coming up in just a couple of minutes here right after us. So I do want to talk about the other side of town a little bit with the Cubs. We talked about it when the Cubs announced it back in August, but it became official today that the Cubs released outfielder Jason Hayward from his contract. He is now 100% a free agent. He is free to pursue opportunities with any of the other major league clubs. We talked about it at the time. I don't want to rehash all of it now. Just best of luck to you, Jay Hay. An outstanding guy to have in a clubhouse. Great teammate. Great ambassador for the team, for the city. Best of luck to you, sir. And he will always be a champion. He will always be one of the members of the 2016 Cubs, and he should be remembered fondly with his time with the Cubs. Not the superstar they thought they were getting, but a great all-around addition to that team. So what do the Cubs do with this offseason? They've got cash. They have said they plan to be aggressive in free agency. We talked about how the White Sox might not have an opening at shortstop. The Cubs, they could certainly have an opening at shortstop. Carlos Correa or Trey Turner or any of those other big-time shortstops, that could be a huge fish to land. Another guy that it's interesting to consider, could the Cubs pursue him, would be Aaron Judge from the Yankees. Now, it seems like Aaron Judge is probably going to stay with the Yankees. It's the only organization he's ever played for. We all know the Yankees have cash. But it would be interesting to see if the Cubs could go after him. Having him play at Wrigley Field, my goodness, think about all the bombs he would hit there. think about all the bombs he would hit with the wind blowing out at Wrigley on a warm summer's day. It would certainly seem to be in his favor for that. Another name that I've heard several times is Jose Abreu, coming from the south side up to the north side and playing first base. I like that move. Schwindel's been adequate at first base. He's been kind of fun. You've had Patrick Wisdom play there at first base from time to time. He's all right. But Jose Abreu, it's not a long-term fix, of course, by any means. So it would be nice if they could get a little bit more of a permanent fixture in there. But Jose Abreu in at first base on the north side, that would be an interesting signing. And it'd be great for Abreu. He wouldn't have to move or do anything like that. It'd be nice to keep him there in town. But the Cubs are looking like they kind of want to go for it a little bit next year. They want to be back to winning a little bit. We'll see what they can do. I think step one is Wilson Contreras. Bring him back. I know I've spoken about it a lot. I talked about it a lot over the summer. It makes no sense to me why you wouldn't want Wilson Contreras on your team. He's just such a great leader. He is such a good... His bat is still very strong. His catching has improved. Yeah, he's not going to catch forever, but you could have him go play first base. Or, hey, there's this wonderful position that's relatively new to the National League. It's called a designated hitter. Means you don't have to play him in the field if you don't want to. He could grow into that role when his knees are finally to the point where just putting him back there to catch on a day in, day out basis just isn't the wise thing to do anymore. That to me should be priority one for the guys there on the north side. That bring back Wilson Contreras. Then look at bringing in some of these big time players. Carlos Correa is somebody that they had talked about bringing in last year. Correa didn't want to be part of a rebuild. I know it's only been a year, but are they far enough along? The Cubs were one of the best teams in baseball the second half of the season. That pitching staff did a terrific job. Have they done enough that somebody like Correa would be, okay, I'll come play for you now. Yeah, you've shown me enough. I'll come play for you guys. They've said they're going to have cash to burn. We'll see. We'll see if they meant it. We'll see if they mean it. Certainly it's going to be something to keep an eye on and pay attention to as we get through these now brisk, cool months of the baseball offseason. All right, that is going to do it for our show tonight. Want to say thank you to Larry B. First of all, he hopped into the chat room right at the very end there. but also just for all the work you do behind the scenes, keeping everybody in line and knowing what's coming up next, what we've got all on our dockets coming up. So thank you, Larry, for all the work you do behind the scenes. It does not go unnoticed. Thank you to Taryn for hanging out in the chat room with us as well. Be sure to stick around. He has got Set Point coming up right after us tonight. Thank you to our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised, Los Great, Key to the Gate, and Anonymous. Thank you for your support. Please go to our website, iesportsradio.com. The Patreon link is right there. Starts at just $5 a month. And it goes to support things like our Mixler.com page, where we have live calls going on. We had Sunday Night Football on the docket for last night. Our partners over at USRN are handling Monday Night Football for us right now. There's also hockey and college basketball during the week. So your support through Patreon allows us to do those kinds of things. So thank you to our Patreon supporters for that. Next week, of course, we're going to be breaking down Bears-Falcons. I'm going to be coming at that from a little bit different of a perspective because I almost certainly won't be watching it live. My wife and I are doing a little mini vacation next weekend. We're going to see the Lion King. Lion King comes to town this week, setting up shop there at the Cadillac Palace. So we're going to go have ourselves some fun, taking a play and a little bit of time away. So I won't actually be watching the game live, but of course we'll be breaking down Bears-Falcons next Monday. We'll also be talking some Blackhawks next week, as Marian Hossa will have had his jersey officially retired by the organization. All kinds of other fun stuff. We'll see you right here next week, next Monday, 7 o'clock, right here on Spreaker.com. Until then, be good, bear down.